Looks like everybody's here. Let's go ahead and get started this evening. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Kurt Gentry. I'm the chairman of the board, San Diego East County Chamber of Commerce, one of the sponsors of tonight's event. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Looking forward to a very good event. Now, I'd like to recognize and introduce Dr. Christina Shirabova, the interim president of Cuyamaca College, our host here this evening, and she has a few words to share with you.
Good evening, everyone. A teacher is always a teacher. Why don't you get that juice running? Well, good evening. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Cuyamaca College faculty, administration, and staff. It really is our honor to be able to host this event and to provide this venue to you. You know, this is our mission. We are here to support the East County residents and voters and our students, and it was precisely because of the generosity of the East County voters that we indeed have this venue today. So, you. After all, as president, I have bragging rights, right? So I have a captive audience, and I just wanted to tell you that we are so happy to be able to serve you, and we recognize that civic involvement is what makes our community better. So I want you to think that we're the community college that serves the community, and again, welcome on behalf of the Cuyamaca College faculty and staff. Thank you.
All right, just a reminder, there were some 3x5 cards outside, and maybe you have some still with you. If you wanted to write down any questions for the candidates, please do so right away. And there's a basket running around somewhere. Brittany, do we know where the basket is for the questions? Back in the back. Okay, so make sure you get your questions in the basket as soon as possible. Reed has it. He's coming down the aisle here. All right, let me also introduce a few folks from the chambers that are involved this evening. First of all, Mike Cully, CEO and president of San Diego East County Chamber of Commerce. Mike, way in the back there, with his hand up. And Warren Savage, the executive director of the Santee Chamber of Commerce. Warren? And Valerie Harrison, president and CEO of the Rancho San Diego Hamul Chamber of Commerce. And Pat Riggs of the Community Council. Pat? There's Pat, right there. All right, let me get right to it here and introduce our moderator today. I'd like to introduce Steve Bosch, KUSI reporter. A very familiar face. Steve, one of the San Diego's most experienced and respected reporters. Steve spent the past, and he corrected me here, 17 years reporting with KUSI on virtually every major development surrounding the governance of San Diego. His reports on government, military, and the courts are marked by tough questions and the ability to interpret complex issues for viewers. He brings a depth of experience to his reporting that comes from covering the White House, to interviewing astronauts, or simply tracking down that one interview everyone else wants but can't get. As an anchor in New York, he won his share of industry accolades, and he is a recipient of multiple Emmy Awards as a reporter and as an anchor. So, Steve Bosch, thank you.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for being here tonight. Let me begin by saying that you folks in the audience are really vital to this debate tonight, because it is your questions and the concerns that you raise here that these candidates are going to have to respond to. And ladies and gentlemen, please take your time when writing down the questions. Make your points as clearly and understandably as you can, and please make sure that your penmanship is easy to read, otherwise I'm going to have a problem. One other point, since the economy appears to be the overriding issue in this campaign, we'd like to get as many questions as possible related to the economy that we can. And as Mr. Gentry mentioned, your questions will be collected and brought up here to the stage. Now for the introduction of the candidates for the 52nd Congressional District. The three candidates in tonight's debate are Duncan D. Hunter, representing the Republican Party. And Mr. Hunter, you may come up on stage. From the Libertarian Party. And finally, Michael Lumpkin, representing the Democrat Party.
I represent the independents. The Grossmont College has no right to use this facility, a public facility, to hold this debate and exclude a qualified candidate for the office. It says right here in a legal advisory that the Grossmont College has chosen to ignore.
You know you're holding up the show. You're holding up the show.
Included before this public facility.
You're not on the ballot.
You're holding up the show.
No, I'm not. I am going to answer any questions that are asked. I am going to participate in this debate. If you don't like it, I don't care. It's the law. It's the law. You cannot hold debates in a public facility and exclude candidates and support other candidates. These Chamber of Commerce hosted this, but they do not own this facility. The taxpayers paid for this facility. And I'm staying and I'm answering every question that's asked.
You're not in Rosemont.
No, sir. I'm staying here in the debate, and, you know, if you beg my candidacy... No, sir. I'm here for debate. I don't have any business. I don't have any business with you.
You're not a candidate.
I'm here for debate. I'm here to participate in the process, as the Grossmont College president said. He said that was the purpose, and now you're excluding a candidate and allowing your public facility to be used against law. I'm here under a legal basis. You have no basis to remove me.
Are you on the ballot?
I don't have to be on the ballot to qualify to be. It was Donald Fry on the ballot. I am a qualified candidate in this race, and this is a public facility. He has no right to remove me. If he removes me, he's abusing his authority, committing a felony. Section 18. No, sir. No, sir. It's not true. You didn't pay for this facility alone. Public taxpayers paid for this facility, not the Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Ryan.
The taxes from the Chamber of Commerce don't run this country. Neither do you. There's only three candidates. Okay, if you'd like to start the debate, I'll start answering when the questions are asked. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. I'm he's committing a felony, abusing his authority by right now. Section 18, USC, Section 595. He's abusing his authority, affecting my candidacy for the office. Grossmont College, you're a pussy, a cowardice. I've challenged you to a debate for $1,000 to charity. Your dad is protecting you. Guy was evicted by his supporters. The register is left out again. This man is a political coward, a pussy, and a criminal.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right, there's no way this is going to be a lively debate. Let me go through the ground rules for tonight's debate. Oh, yes, he is. Mr. Benoit's up there. All right, the ground rules for tonight's debate. The candidates will have 3 minutes each for opening statements. We will then go to the open forum, that is the questions that are submitted by the audience, which I will read to the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and please no more, to respond to each question. And candidates, a 30-second sign and a 10-second sign will appear in front of you, and please try to hold to the time limits. We will continue this question and answer forum until the candidates offer their closing statements. And as with the opening statements, the closing statements will be 3 minutes in length. After this closing statements, Mr. Gentry will return to close out tonight's event. We'll now begin tonight's opening statements with Micheal Lumpkin. And Mr. Lumpkin, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the Cuyahoga College here, the Chambers of Commerce, the AHOS, and AT&T, and each and every one of you for coming out this evening and participating in democracy. You don't have to look too far. In fact, this is probably the front page of the UT to see the challenges that we face today as a nation. The challenges we face include everything from a challenged economy, a lack of energy security, educational problems, to conflicts that are going on overseas. And we need to make sure that we elect the person with the most experience to deal with these issues. Frankly, these aren't issues that focus on the right or the left. They affect each and every one of us. Myself, I'm a guy who grew up in a household. My dad was a disabled firefighter. We relied on his disability just to get by. I worked to put myself through college. Went to the University of California, San Diego, and then joined the United States Navy. I served as a Navy SEAL for over 2 decades. I spent 5 years doing counterinsurgency and counter-narcotics operations in Central and South America. I spent time in Afghanistan, Iraq, where I was the deputy commander of all special operations in the country. I had 2,000 Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Army Rangers working for me in 40 different locations. I've managed budgets in the billions of dollars and literally had thousands of civilian and military personnel work for me. We have challenges as a nation, and we need to have qualified people to deal with those challenges. And the choice is real this year, because the election and the results this year will impact this country for decades to come. So we can elect the congressman's kid, or we can elect somebody who has the qualifications to deal with these issues. As somebody who is a long-term resident of the 52nd District, I'm a resident of Hamul. I lived there. Even when I was working in the Congress as a liaison, where I represented a $6 billion budget, I flew home every weekend, because my commitment to my home is here. And I understand the challenges that we all face right now. The challenged economy, the shrinking job base, an unsecure border. These are things that affect each and every one of us every day. And we have a choice. We have a choice to elect somebody who can deal with the issues, who has the values and independent thinking that each of us have in the 52nd District. Thank you very much.
Next, Mr. Benoit, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. I spent a few years in Vermont and then moved to Pacific Beach. I grew up in Pacific Beach, and after that I moved to the East County. I've been there in the East County since 1972. I have 2 daughters, and one of them just made me a grandfather. So I'm also a business owner in the East County. I own a home inspection company. Also own a flyer and delivery service. I've been doing that for 20 years. Previous to that, I was an insurance agent, sales manager, and district manager with a major insurance company. That's my business background. I'm running for Congress, and I am the candidate in this race that is the champion of the Constitution. In about the early 90s, I was very displeased with the direction our country was going in. Like most people, I just was trying to work the American dream up to that point. But then I saw us going downhill. I saw a federal government getting out of control, writing legislation, taking away our liberties. engaging in foreign enterprises that weren't beneficial to our country. And I saw the beginning of what we're facing now with these economic hard times. In the early 90s, the federal government, to finance overseas operation and to help kick the economy, Federal Reserve Bank and the federal government started printing money and making money easy, making credit easy in this country, and started to balloon the economy and balloon the stock market. And we've seen what's just happened recently when they kept pouring the money loose to pay for these expenses. An economy that's geared up for warfare and welfare is breaking in this country, and we're losing our liberties in the process. Things like the Real ID Act, things like the Patriot Act, things like the Military Commission Act, and 10.5 trillion. You know, I can't even remember the size of the federal debt now. I've been checking that debt clock, regularly every other day. And about 2 months ago, the debt clock said it was 9.5 trillion. Now it's at 10.5 trillion. What's the reason I'm running for Congress, folks, is Congress, quite frankly, stinks. They're spending our money ungodly, and they're mortgaging our children's future. Somebody's got to stop the spending, the borrowing, the taxing, and the printing of money. Thank you.
Your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here with you tonight. It's so good to see people come out from every side. I mean, this is what Healthy Debate's all about. This is our fourth debate, I think, out of five so far, and it's an honor to be here with you. I grew up here in Alpine, in El Cajon. I went to Granite Hills just down the road. I went to Grossmont, not Cuyamaca, while I was attending San Diego State. And what I did during the early 90s is I had a few businesses while at San Diego State, or in the late 90s, the big tech boom that we had here. I was one of those many people that started a website company, did some .com stuff, was working here, got a job after San Diego State, working in the high-tech industry in Sorrento Valley. And I was out there working in this industry, commuting like everybody does every day to work, when the market started going down and that tech bubble burst. You all think back to that was about 2000. When that tech bubble started going off, we had meetings every Friday. People were getting laid off left and right. And it's reminiscent of what's going through San Diego now and going through the rest of the nation now. But I was working at that job. I woke up one morning, saw the airplane crash into the World Trade Center, the very first tower, thought it was an accident, drove to work, kept the news on, got to work in Sorrento Valley, realized a second plane hit it and that we had been attacked by terrorists. I quit my job the next day, not because I needed the Marine Corps to pay for something for me or because I expected anything out of it, but because I wanted to serve this great nation. Joined the Marine Corps, went to Iraq twice, 2003 and 2004. Saw I transitioned in early 2003 from the Iraqi people thinking that we were going to be able to help them and they would have a McDonald's on every corner and an ATM and it would be just like America instantly. Things don't work that way. I came home, I went back over in 2004, and that's when the IED started going off really bad. Things really escalated from that point, and I was in Fallujah. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2005, and I started building homes. If you think back to 2005, that was a very bad time to start building homes. It was kind of like getting into the high-tech industry in 2000. But we started building homes, came back down here to San Diego to help my father in his presidential election campaign, and I decided I was going to run for Congress. About 2 weeks after that, I got called back to active duty, and I went to Afghanistan. And I want to introduce somebody who's here tonight who I would not be here if it wasn't for, and that's my wife, Margaret. Margaret carried my campaign for me while I was in Afghanistan, while I was gone. If it wasn't for her, I would not be here tonight. So Margaret, please stand up. I just want to thank you. You're going to hear from me direct answers to your questions. You might even get some yeses or some nos, and I challenge my opponents to do the same thing. Give you straight answers to your questions. You'll always know where I stand. Thank you.
Now we go to the of tonight's debate. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes per question. And question number 1 will go to Duncan D. Hunter first. The question is, given this has been deemed a change election, define legislation that you would introduce that would signal a clear departure from past performances.
Number one, I think the most important thing that we can do right now that would be a clear departure from past performance is build a border fence, secure the border, start getting after companies that hire illegal aliens, That's a very clear departure from the Bush administration and the last eight years where they haven't secured the border, and it has not been a number one issue for them. I think that would be a very clear departure. I think on the war on terrorism, I think we're achieving victory right now. I don't think that course needs to be changed. I think when it comes to Iraq right now, because that's one of the big topics here, of course, you have a libertarian, you have a Navy SEAL. Iraq's going to come up a few times. I think that pulling out of Iraq right now and making that a big change theme is like pulling firefighters off of a wildfire when you get 70% of what's the word here? Contained. Thank you. So I think that we're almost there in Iraq. I think the worst thing that we can do right now is let those Bush tax cuts expire. I think we have to keep taxes low. And I would think that the biggest change that we can do here in California is return to our traditional family base and our traditional conservative values and create people of character, create young people of character so we can keep this country strong.
And now Mr. Michael Benoit.
Well, I think first we have to introduce legislation to Congress to get them to read the Constitution. The Constitution was the instrument to set up a government that was designed to secure our liberties and pretty much leave us alone to pursue our dreams and create a prosperous country. Now, today, you can't tell me that a $3 trillion federal budget is a government that's shackled by the Constitution, because that's what the Constitution is supposed to do. We live in a welfare society, and it's killing us, folks. It's causing us to go broke. Increasing the federal debt $1 trillion in just a few months. We used to rail against the federal debt when it was $4 trillion. And we're looking at unemployment. We're looking at people that are having trouble making their mortgage payments, losing their houses, worried about keeping their jobs. And the federal government is not slowing down. They're talking about, the presidential candidates are talking about tinkering with the tax code. But to fund a $3 trillion government doesn't matter how they tinker with it. We're the ones that are going to have to pay the price for this government, and our children are going to pay the price. Thomas Jefferson said that when you borrow in the name of funding, and $10.5 trillion debt is borrowing in the name of funding, you're swindling futurity. And we're leaving a mess for our kids. This is the first time in the history of America that we're turning over the country in worse condition to the next generation. And we have to do something about stopping Washington in their tracks. They're spending too much, borrowing too much, taxing too much, and now they're printing too much money.
Michael Lumpkin.
Three pieces come to mind at the front end. First of all, our southern border is a national security issue, and we need to control our border. And what this is more than just a border fence. This is coming up with a strategy that not only deals with the border, that includes, leveraging technology. There's places where a fence absolutely makes sense. There's also increasing the size of the border patrol. We absolutely need to do that because we have this unique challenge here being so close to the border. We need to control the border. The second thing we need to do is we need to create incentives for alternative and renewable energy. The 52nd district here is so unique because we have three unique qualities. We have open spaces, we have wind, and we have sunshine. And we need to, just like on the coast where they made it a hub for biotech, we need to do the same thing here in the 52nd district and create incentives. And that means working from the federal level with the state with the county in order to create the opportunities for businesses to thrive here. We absolutely of our growth regional cloud here is tied to defense. What about the other 80%? We need to focus on that as well. We need to make sure we broaden our tax base so we have more revenues for our schools and for our infrastructure. Then the third piece we need to do, piece of legislation, is more restoring checks and balances and driving an exit strategy for Iraq. Right now, the very Iraqi government wants us out of there on 2011, excuse me. We need to figure out how we're going to make that happen. If you go to my website, I have a very good plan there, lumpkinforcongress.com, and I recommend you check it out. Thank you.
Question number 2. And Mr. Benoit, you will be first to respond, and again, you will have 2 minutes. The question: with regards to the budget crisis, read that to bailout, which way would you have voted and why?
Okay, well, people are laughing because they know the answer. I'm against all federal bailouts. It reminds me of James Madison in the early Congress when they were voting on money for French refugees. And Madison, who was one of the chief architects of the Constitution, got up and he said, "I can't lay my finger anywhere in the Constitution that allows us to spend our constituents' money, no matter how good the cause is, in this kind of manner." And I'm afraid once we cross the line, there's no telling where we'll end up. And you see where we end up now. Pork barrel, bailouts. Every federal program is a bailout. And folks, bailouts are another term for plunder. They take money out of your pocket, and especially this Wall Street bailout, taking money out of your pocket and giving it to Wall Street. And it just blows my mind that our Congress thinks it even has the power to do this. There's no constitutional authority for it. I wonder, I hear people invoking the Constitution all the time when they're running for office. It's just like, do they even have a clue as to what it says? Once they get in there, they're voting on legislation that's unconstitutional. It's just people mouthing words, like people that, when they say the Pledge of Allegiance today, too many just mouth the words. They don't really feel the spirit behind that. And frankly, folks, if you look at the federal government now, it's way beyond what the founders intended. They intended that the federal government would be the foreign government for California, the foreign government for the United States. And that's all. Domestic government was supposed to happen locally. Thank you.
The people of this country should be morally outraged on how we got here, first of all. If Congress was asleep at the wheel while they focus on deregulation, more deregulation, and then when things collapse, all of a sudden they're upset about the lack of regulation. The people of this country are tired of politicians talking out of both sides of their mouth when it's convenient. It took the Senate $150 billion worth of pork to bribe the House in order to get this legislation passed. Can anybody see anything wrong with this? As far as I'm concerned, we need to throw all the bums out. If this was a computer, I would Control-Alt-Delete and reboot the system. I would not have supported the legislation because there's no plan on long-term on how it's going to result in stimulating the economy. In fact, we've already seen another $250 billion. We're seeing, now they're talking about another stimulation package. It's reactive, not proactive, and what we need to do is elect members of Congress who understand that if a company or an industry is so big that its collapse or failure will bring our economy to its knees, it requires regulation or it needs to go away. So you want to talk about change? Change is a about having people who are proactive instead of reactive. And it's time for change. Thank you.
Yeah, the answer to this is easy. We all say that we would have voted against it. We would have voted against it both times. I would have voted against it. It was bad legislation. But the whole problem is this. I'm not going to talk in platitudes here. But since 2006, Democrats have been in control of Congress, period. You want to see where gas prices are at now? You want to see who Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac gave the money to? If none of us watch the news at night, then Mr. Lumpkin's argument might make sense. That it was just, it was all of Congress, they were all bad, and there was no regulation. The fact is that there was regulation. It was put up by Republicans, and it was voted down by Democrats. And that's why we Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac gave Chris Dodd millions of dollars, Senator Dodd. Barack Obama got the second most amount in the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. That's why nothing's going to be done to get our money back for us from this bad bailout bill. There was money taken from us because the guys at the very top, one of which even says he's against pork barrel spending, voted for this with $130 billion of pork in it. So I'm not so concerned, though, about those congressmen that voted yes on the first vote. They thought they were going to help America, and I believe that was their best intention. It was the ones that got bought off on that second vote because of all of that pork in that bill. Those are the ones we need to take a really hard look at. No on that bailout.
Question number 3, and we've had a lot of questions this evening about global warming. Mr. Hunter, you will be first this time, and the question is, how serious is this global warming issue?
First of all, I don't think global warming is man-made. Global warming has kind of turned into a religion. You have scientists on both sides of the global warming debate. Some say, and those in Hollywood and on the West Coast mostly, say that global warming is man-made. You have other scientists, very, very, very smart, very distinguished scientists, who say that global warming is cyclical. It comes and goes. The Earth gets very cold, the Earth freezes, the Earth then warms up. And I understand that we're at a university here at Duncan College, and that this is not exactly the last bastion of conservatism here where we're speaking at today. But let me say this. I think that global warming is a threat, but it's not a man-made one, and we shouldn't have the U.S. government getting involved, telling local businesses, local companies, having the state telling local businesses, local companies, Americans what they have to do when it comes to global warming, because all they're going to do is increase taxes to offset carbon offsets and a lot of other silly stuff. I don't think that global warming is one of the major things facing us in this world today. What I think the environmental problem is having to buy oil from Mexico, Canada, and the Middle East. That's why we should get off foreign oil. It's for national security reasons. It isn't for global warming reasons. I'm all for helping out the environment, anything that we can do to do so, but it should not be government mandated. It should not cost taxpayers money. It should be done by
Thank you very much. Mr. Lumpkin.
Global warming is one of those things you either believe or you don't believe, as far as the human contribution. I believe that human beings are contributing to global warming. And it goes back to, Pascal's argument, for those who, since we're at a university, if you believe in God or you shouldn't believe in God, the pros and the cons for it. It's the same with global warming. And we need to take steps to make sure we reduce the human carbon footprint. We need to reduce our dependence on petroleum. We need, from a national security standpoint, to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. We lack an energy strategy in this country, and we need to come up with one that's not focused to the 2012 or 2013, but 2040, 2060, something that reaches out so we can sustain our economic growth as a nation. And I want to go back to the question about the bailout for a second. There's enough fingerprints on both Republicans and Democrats on this issue. So the fact that you blame a specific party is part of the problem we have in this country. Bringing this country to its knees. And I'll tell you what, if Mr. Hunter is elected, he will be a freshman congressman in the minority party, which means essentially at the end of the day, he's not going to have a seat at the table. He's not. So if we want to have proactive legislation to fix our markets, it's essential that we have somebody who's in the majority party.
Well, on the issue of global warming, I'm going to come in on the middle of these two things. One thing's for certain, that if you let the government apply the solutions, they'll probably have us in an ice age. Of course, we could retire the entire Congress, and we'd reduce a lot of CO2 emissions. But it does make sense to go and look at the things that can produce alternative energy for us. And again, I think the federal government is in the way in those areas. I kind of like to blame both parties for their bipartisan support of oil companies, because there's other natural fuels out there. For example, the hemp oil, the hemp plant. And our government, and some people think that the hemp plant is marijuana, but it's the cousin to marijuana, and it doesn't have any THC content. But and the founding fathers, the Constitution was written on hemp paper, and hemp was a product that we used for all kinds of things, for sails and sailing ships and clothing and ropes. And it was used to help us. In fact, the federal government promoted during World War II the use of hemp to help win the war. But Randolph Hearst and his paper mills and a few other people lobbied Congress to cause it to be outlawed. You can produce, and this was a few years back, they were producing hemp oil for diesel engines at about 50 cents a gallon. I imagine it'd be $1 a gallon now, and it's a renewable resource. So don't ask the federal government to solve this problem, folks. Look and find out where they're in the way.
The next question from the audience, and Mr. Lumpkin, you will go first. And the question is, what inspired you to seek the position of congressman?
Well, it was interesting. I was sitting in my office in Washington, D.C. As a liaison, and I saw young Mr. Hunter over there announcing his candidacy on Fox News. And essentially, it was one of those things in my backyard, as I felt there was some sort of monarchy being developed, passing a seat from father to the eldest son. And I realized a long time ago that the fight for democracy is not in a village in Afghanistan, and it's not in a mud hut in anywhere else in the world. It's right here at home. It's about having a voice and doing what's right. It's not about right and left. It's about right or wrong. It's about living up to the Constitution. When I raised my right hand 22 years ago, I took an oath to defend that Constitution and the people of this country. It wasn't to any political party, and it certainly wasn't to any monarchy. So when I saw that happening, when I saw that this was the intent here in my home, I couldn't stand by and let it happen. So I retired from the Navy. I turned down promotion to captain 06, one pay grade below an admiral. I turned down a $125,000 cash bonus. You can imagine that was very popular in the household. And then I announced my candidacy. I retired on the 1st of September 2007 is when I retired, and I announced my candidacy on the 8th of September after I mowed the lawn and did everything that my wife needed me to do. So, and ever since, we've been running to win this seat, and in fact, we just got an informal poll that says we're doing very well, in fact, 3 points ahead.
Mike, how'd you get 3 points ahead of me? My main motivation for running for Congress is I'm greedy. I'm greedy for liberty. Okay? Not just mine, but yours too. Because I know you can't be free unless you're free. Unless all Americans are free. And I'm talking about the freedom, if you got a habit that I don't like, that you're not bothering anybody, you should be free to practice that habit. You should be free to practice whatever religion you want. You should be free to participate in an election process that's not rigged. And frankly, our election process in most of these districts is rigged. It's rigged for either the Democrat or the Republican. And it disenfranchises most people. And some districts are set up with, because of gerrymandering, they're set up so almost a guaranteed victory for the Republican. Other districts are set up so it's almost a guaranteed victory for the Democrat. And then what you end up with is a pretty stale Congress that way, because there's no fire in the electorate. If we had competitive districts, we'd be in auditoriums 5 times the size, and they would be packed. You know, people would really care more about the process. But Duncan Hunter Sr. helped me decide to get involved in politics. And I know people on the left will say, well, you probably agree with this federal school lunch program. But I don't. And I talked to Duncan Hunter Sr. on the radio in the early 90s, and he supported the school lunch programs. And I said, you know what? I don't see any difference. We got people that are asking the federal government to do things that we're supposed to do here locally. And I'm the first guy that'll show up with a lunch for somebody at school that's hungry. So I'm not talking about not feeding the kids. The federal government has no business doing that, and we see the mess that we're in now because we're letting the federal government do everything. And so that's the short version of why I'm running.
It's very simple for me. I serve in the Marine Corps. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked during good times and bad times. And I want to keep serving the American people. I want to make sure that taxes stay low. I want to make sure that the border's secured. I want to make sure we have victory in Iraq and Afghanistan. I want to make sure we have fair trade deals with other countries so we can keep San Diegans and other Americans employed. These things mean a lot to me. And I think that it's kind of strange that both candidates mention my father when they talk about why they're running for Congress. I know Mr. Benoit has been running for about eight years now. Mr. Lumpkin's a little bit late. He probably should have ran against him a few years ago. But I think it would be wise. Going after me because my name's Duncan Hunter is like saying Dale Earnhardt Jr., who came in second place last weekend with the sprint cup race, by the way. It's like saying Dale Earnhardt Jr. can't drive because his name's Dale Earnhardt. So I'm basically running for Congress to serve the country, serve the American people, serve the people of San Diego, and to make sure that national security remains the #1 priority of the federal government. It has to be. Without national security, nothing else matters. If you think back to the days immediately after 9/11, nothing mattered. You didn't want to get on an airplane, didn't want to go to the mall, you didn't want to do anything. And that's the most important thing that this federal government can actually do is prosecute terrorism throughout the world, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, wherever radical Islam pops up its head, it's already
Our next question, and Mr. Benoit, you may go first on this question, and the question is, do you support keeping the internet free from taxation, and do you support adding regulations?
First, absolutely keep it free, and no to regulations.
You do have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll repeat myself. The internet it works best because it is free. It shows you the miracle of the internet. This is how freedom works. We should copy this in all aspects of our life. And the regulations, just if you got kids, just make sure where they're going on the internet. And we don't need government to be a nanny on that kind of thing for us.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Yeah, I don't think the internet should be taxed. It's almost like the last bastion of freedom sales-wise that we have in this country is off the internet. I think that there ought to be regulations when it comes to having the internet in public places like kids' libraries, elementary schools. Those kids should not be able to access things like pornography on those computers. So that I think we can all agree that there ought to be some regulations. But in effect, the internet is the parent's responsibility when it does come to regulation. It's like kids bringing home books, kids bringing home magazines, going to movies, listening to bad music. Anything that you as a parent feels is wrong for your children, like the internet, if they're going on site, that should be a family responsibility. And I think that's one big problem in the society that we have right now. We're looking to government to fix everything for us when they ought to be fixed first in our own households and in our own homes.
Our next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lumpkin.
Well, thank you. No, I don't think that it should be taxed, and nor do I think it should be regulated. I think it's the last bastion of free speech, and it is a parent's responsibility to monitor children to make sure that they're not doing what they shouldn't be doing on the internet. That's the role of good parents. I would like to go back and just mention something. While I appreciate Duncan's service to our country, like I do everybody who wears the uniform, when he was in middle school, I was down in Central and South America doing counterinsurgency operations. I understand completely what the threat is to America. And it's just not something that's emanating from the Middle East or other places. National security is a principal issue for the federal government. And is one of their core things that they need to focus on. And their job is to keep all of us safe so we can pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And, it didn't take a catastrophic event in this country to get me to be patriotic. I did it years before it. And where we are, with my master's degree in national security, I'm recognized by the Department of Defense as an expert in national security. I have a specialty in the Western Hemisphere and special operations and low-intensity conflict. I would walk into the Congress as one of the foremost experts in national security in this country. And I think that is a skill set that is in dire need in the Congress.
Mr. Lumpkin, you will be the first to respond to this question. It is, what is your position relative to tax plans proposed by the presidential candidates?
Well, it's one of those things is that taxes, we can sit here and talk taxes all day long, but the thing we really need to talk about is federal spending. That's what's significantly out of control in this nation. Each of the tax plans that have been presented by the presidential candidates is not going to stand on its own once it gets through the Congress. It's going to be adjusted, massaged. I understand the intent of each of them, but what we have to do first and foremost is to get our spending under control. And this is spending, whether it's defense acquisition programs where there's significant waste. It's how we spend every penny you are taxed every year. And that is the principal thing we have to do right now. We have a $3.3 trillion discretionary budget right now. We have a compound annual growth rate in defense of 10.1%. Our debt ceiling is going to be at $11.3 trillion here soon. That means each and every one of you owes almost $40,000 in national debt. Spending is the problem. So right now, until we can come up with meaningful reductions in federal spending, we're just going to tax more and tax more and tax more to keep paying a bill that is out of control. And that is one of the foremost things that we need to do on all fronts. We need to figure out what our national priorities are, which are clearly defense, education, energy security, these things that are central to who we are, and we need to reduce the spending before we start going and reaching back into your pocketbooks.
First off, either Mr. Lumpkin doesn't know what either of the economic tax policies are, or he just avoided answering another question with a nice 2-minute speech. I don't know about either one. They're both looking good and bad. But here's my answer: cut spending. There's one big difference between each economic tax policy. One's socialism and one's not. One It's very simple. One of those presidential candidates, John McCain, feels that we ought to keep taxes low for all Americans, for all business, and grow our way out of this mess. Give them more incentive to hire more people, buy more plants, sell off assets if they have to. The other one says tax those that are wealthy and spread that wealth around to Joe Plummer. So I think that Senator McCain's is the right answer.
All right, Mr. Benoit.
Okay. Who here thinks...
Good thing you're in the middle, Michael.
Yeah, who here thinks that the federal government is going to cut spending? If you do, I'll see you in the hallway afterwards. I got some property to sell you in the high desert, because I really don't own any property. Talk about one guy's tax plan versus the other guy's tax plan. Don't you love election season? Everybody's going to promise you something. And then there's a joke that's too long to tell you regarding that. And after they get in, it's like all promises forgotten. The tax burden here, I guess, raise your hand if you don't think it's heavy enough. They all have their little tax tweaking, but it's just tax tweaking. Mike says he's correcting me on the federal budget, $3.3 trillion. Must have went up $200 billion since I looked last, and I don't doubt that it did. Folks, they're pulling that money from you one way or the other. It doesn't matter where they laid the tax. It's coming off the back of the working person, the laboring person. I remember when, I don't actually remember the history lesson about when they passed the 16th Amendment and started the income tax, and they were only going to start to tax the very rich. And guys like Henry Ford probably said, go ahead and tax me, I don't care. Your Ford goes up from $455 to $485 now. And that's the way it goes. The tax burden, you pay it one way or the other, and it costs of the products that you buy. But we shouldn't be talking about tinkering around with the tax code. People ought to get the same kind of tax deductions that corporations get. Corporations can deduct everything they need to exist. So why shouldn't an individual be able to deduct everything that they need to exist, like your rent or your house payment or all these things? Corporations get to. So have a little fairness in the tax code. I'd like to see that happen, short of getting rid of the IRS altogether or the income tax altogether.
Mr. Hunter, you may respond first to the next question, which is, what is your plan to get us off foreign oil, and how soon will it start?
drill, drill, and drill. We obviously have to develop other sources of oil too, but here's the big mistake. The big mistake in this is allowing the federal government to tell businesses what they have to do, which energy source they have to use. You saw this with ethanol. Ethanol made food prices go up, didn't do anybody any good, cost taxpayers millions. Keep the government out of saying which technologies we have to use, which work and which don't. There's money to be made, because oil is expensive, obviously. There's money to be made with alternative energies. It's going to be made in the private sector. It's not going to be done by some government bureaucrat. So I think that's where we have to give incentives. We ought to help those companies out that are working on alternative energy sources, but we ought to be drilling right now. We haven't built a refinery in over 30 years. We ought to be refining more of our own oil, using more of our own oil, while at the same time building and making progress when we have alternative energy. And let me bring something up too. Going back one or two questions back, Mr. Lumpkin, not just one here. I think one thing, one of the reasons that Mike won't answer about taxes is because he's never held a private sector job outside of the government. He doesn't to have to pay employees, provide health care. He doesn't understand what it's like to be able to be fired in times like we have now, or to be laid off, or to have to go market. Because the government doesn't go bankrupt, because that's who he worked for. I've done both. I've been in that private sector, been in that military sector, so I have more experience, I would say, in that private sector. Maybe that's why he doesn't understand the different presidential tax plans.
Okay, I guess if you're going to vote for somebody with the most military experience, it would be Mike. And I guess if you're going to vote for somebody with the most business experience, it would be this Mike. What's the question? Oh, getting off foreign oil. Well, again, I think let the free market work. Let's see what hemp oil can do for us. It's renewable. Get it for $1 a gallon for gasoline, for diesel use. Start seeing more diesel engines come out. And I'm okay with safe drilling here in America. I don't think we should believe that it's been the evil Democrats that have stopped us from drilling here in America, because actually George Bush Sr. issued an executive order that outlawed drilling off the coast of the Gulf Coast and the California coast. And Reagan signed into law legislation that was passed by Congress, also doing the same thing in the 80s. So I think the oil companies have their hand on the back of both sides of the aisle, and they manipulated things so that they have a monopoly. And so let's just let the free market, let's deregulate. Start with hemp. It's amazing what hemp can produce. So let's go with that.
Well, we definitely need to look at alternative renewable sources. In other words, we need to develop a national energy strategy and put all assets on the table. Everything from solar to hydrogen cars to everything else that we can do, but we need to develop a national strategy. And I believe it should be incentivized through small business initiatives from the government. I find Mr. Hunter's argument about, incentivizing energy quite interesting, especially when he says he agrees with every vote his father has ever made, and his father supported earmarks for the DP-2 aircraft, a plane that won't fly, that the Defense Department of one form or another, I don't know what it is. But I would recommend that we definitely do that, give small business the opportunity to solve these long-term issues. And I think Mr. Hunter needs to go back and do some better opponent research when it comes to my private sector qualifications. I actually have 7 years working in the private sector, 4 in management. Unfortunately, I didn't think high school and college mattered because of my age. So for yours, I don't know.
Thank you. Mr. Lumpkin, you touched on our next question, but Mr. Benoit, you may go first. And the question is, what would you do to decrease earmark spending?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. The problem with earmark spending is that too much of it is unconstitutional. And that would be things like, your bridge to Alaska. But to nowhere. The federal government, when you look at the Constitution, what the federal government is supposed to spend money on, is pretty limited. So, I'm not against earmark spending by the politicians and the Congress people, in the sense if it was for something that, for example, the military needed and wanted. We'd rather have a congressman earmark the spending than a bureaucrat. And what a lot of people don't understand is that when they pass their budget, they pass the budget first, and then they earmark the spending. Okay? So the overall budget is passed, and then they decide where it's all going to go. And some's going to go here, some's going to go to this project or that project. So when the earmark spending should definitely be out in the open. It shouldn't be attached to non-related legislation, and it really shouldn't be for pure pork. And if it's out in the open, then we can see who's voting for pork and who's voting for something that we actually do need.
Earmarks are a process that was designed to, when you have a requirement that rears its ugly head or its need comes about within the budgetary cycle and the request of budget estimates and things, that you can have it inserted. I don't advocate throwing out the baby, with the bathwater, but what we do need to do is to make sure that earmarks should be used very judiciously and when in need, not for pet projects for each member of Congress so it can result in campaign contribution kickbacks or things to fund future campaigns. What's happened is that